I've been at this for a while, and I just like using the computer to make things easier and automate all the grunt work. You can look up my bio online, go to my website, whatever, that's fine. What we're going to cover today, we're going to assume that you all have some working knowledge of macros. This is not a 101 session, and we're not going to stop to explain basic concepts. So we hope you have some familiarity with recording macros, creating macros, editing macros by using the VBA editor. We hope you're familiar with how modules work in the VBA editor, and that you at least had a look at macro code and how that works. Hopefully you're also familiar with creating keyboard shortcuts in Word using the customized keyboard dialog. And hopefully you are a little bit familiar with wildcards. We won't get into it too much, but you'll find it very useful for some of what we're going to do today. We're not going to be software specific. I'm not going to cover exactly how to get to the Visual Basic Editor. I'm not going to go, this is what you do on a Mac versus a PC, or whether you've got Word 2010 or 2016 or 2019 or whatever. That's on you to learn based on your own system. This session is going to be more about the macros themselves and what they can do for you. I'm going to give examples of how I use these macros. It may not be the way that you use them. You may go, well, how come she does it that way? As far as the editing application, that's irrelevant. We're looking at how the structure of the macro works. And again, it's on you to get some ideas on how you can apply these things to the way that you work. Referring to our bullet points here, what we're going to cover today is first we're going to go over some quick reminders, the 4 rules of Macro Club, just some basic rules of what things to keep in mind when you're dealing with macros. And then we're going to go over 3 basic, I'm calling them shells. That's not an official technical term, that's just what I'm calling them. They're basically macros, overarching macros that you can use to drop in the macros that you use to power them up and make them more efficient and helpful. And then finally, just at the end, I'll mention a few extra resources that you may find useful as you do this sort of work. So with that, let's begin. Okay, first rule of Macro Club, and I hope you all know this, but I got to say it, always practice on a test file. When you're using a macro, for example, that's going to run through your entire document, you want to make sure it's going to do what you think it's going to do. So ideally, whenever you're editing, you're going to be stashing your original file somewhere separate, and and keep progress files as you go, whether it's by chapter or by what stage of the edit you're in, or by date or whatever. Always make sure to keep something separate. And whatever I know I'm going to be testing, I will just even open a separate folder and just call it test files. And that way I'll have different versions of what I'm playing with. And it's my actual live file that I'm working on is free and clear, and I'm not touching that at all until I know that what I'm doing is going to work. So that's very important, and that's why it's the first rule of Macro Club. Okay, second rule of Macro Club. This is a little less critical, but a good practice is to not store macros in your normal template. I've been reading up on this, and now Paul Beverly says that this is not as critical as it used to be, because it used to be, and I'm sure we've all had it happen, that it's not a matter of if normal will get corrupted, but when, in which case you just have to delete it and let Word create a new normal template. But in that case, you've lost everything that's in it. I use a separate template. I call it Tricks, T-R-I-X, and I just keep separate all my personal macros that I use across all my projects are in there. And then I also have separate templates for each client if I have specific things for each client that I do. We won't get into that whole system because that's a separate presentation. But basically just use normal for your test macros, or throwaway macros only. Or if you really don't feel handy with templates and you just, well, I don't even know what you're talking about, go ahead and save them in normal, but then make sure you have a really robust backup system, whether you copy the text of those macros just into a text file, or keep incremental backups of your normal template or whatever. You don't want to just let that be sitting there and then you lose everything. That's horrible, and you don't want it to happen. So yeah, test in normal then, and copy them to your working template, whatever you call it. Like I said, mine is Tricks, once you know they work. So that's kind of a little bit of housekeeping rule. Okay, the third rule of Macro Club, always remember that if you want to access the macros that are in a template, if it's a separate template other than normal, you have to open that template from within Word using the File Open menu option. If you just double click on it in a folder, you're just going to open another document based on that template. And the way you know you did it right is that the title bar will show whatever the name of the template is, .dot or .dotx or .dotm, whatever you name the file. If it shows document 1 or document 3 or whatever, you don't have a template, you've got a file based on a template. So when you go into the Visual Basic Editor and you try to open a template and it says this project is unviewable, that means that you've got a document open instead of a template. So you need to go back into Word and open the template from within Word. So that's rule number 3. And finally, the fourth rule, again, this is hopefully something if you're familiar with wildcards, make sure you turn off tracking if you're doing any sort of wildcard replace. Searching is fine. So if you're going to use wildcards to find something and then close the find dialog and do something else with what you found, that's fine. You can keep the tracking on. But if you're doing it directly all in the Word file find dialog, that's going to cause all kinds of havoc and just really bad juju. So yeah, don't do that. Be really careful with track changes and wildcard search and replace. Searching is fine. So that's the end of our rules for Macro Club. Okay, and with that, let's take a look at our first shell. I'm calling this one the loop shell. And what this one does is it runs a macro through an entire document. Sometimes you want to repeat something throughout an entire document. So why wouldn't you do, like, say, a find and replace all? Well, sometimes what you want to do isn't a simple replace. Maybe you need to edit only part of it, or maybe you want to do some other complicated operation, or you could, if you've got a complex macro and you want to run it, you could sit and keep hitting the hotkey for it 1,000 times if that's your thing, but I don't really enjoy doing that. You can just plunk it into this loop shell and let Word do the work for you. So oddly enough, there's a programming structure called a loop, and there are several different kinds of loops. One of the resources we'll see at the end is Jack Lyon's macro cookbook for Microsoft Word. Jack Lyon is the proprietor of editorium.com. Hopefully you're using his products. They're really great time savers, but he's also a really great educator on things like macros. He's also got a wildcard cookbook, which is excellent. I highly recommend it. They're like $10 on Amazon. So thus ends the commercial. We'll talk about that later. So with that, let's get started and look at what these things do. So here is my tricks template, and I have opened it from within Word. Oh, nuts. Abby, the share thing is blocking my file name, so I can't show. Let me see here. Will this help? There it is. Okay, so if I move it to the right side, you can see this is the template that's open. Okay, I'm going to re-maximize this. I can't maximize because it's covered by stupid. Okay, here we go. So I've got the template open. So now I'm going to open the VBA editor with, on my computer, it's Alt F11. You use whatever works for you. So here's my editor. Here are my modules. And here is the tricks one. And I'm going to look in this is my tricks module where I keep all my macros for the purposes of this presentation. Okay, so here we are in the shell. We're just going to walk through this quick. So what this shell does is it finds something and then does something with based on what it finds. And then it repeats until it doesn't find the thing anymore. So let's just walk through the code. And now the first thing you'll notice is that we've got some text in green with the apostrophe at the beginning. That is a comment, and that's a real neato programmer trick. And basically that text is not compiled. It's not live code. So it's really great for putting notes in the file. You can use it for all kinds of things. You can, and you'll see this as we work through, It explains, you can write them to explain what's happening in a certain section of code. Another programmer trick is you can use it to temporarily remove a line of code. If you're troubleshooting, you think that a certain line is causing problems. Like let's say we think that match case is a problem, so I can just type an apostrophe in front of it, and now it becomes a comment. I didn't delete it, it's still there, but it's basically been deactivated. And then I can try running the macro again and see if that fixes the problem. And then no, it wasn't that, it's something else. I can just take the apostrophe out and it's live code again. Okay, so that's really useful. In some of our macros coming up, you'll see that I've put a line in the beginning to remind me what is the keyboard shortcut that I assigned to this thing, in case something happens and I lose all my shortcuts and I have to reprogram it. That way I've got it right there. I can remember what the keyboard shortcut was. So that's helpful. And you can also, again, you'll see this in future macros, you can credit code that you lift from other people, or say, you know, so-and-so helped me with this. And that's just kind of a nice thing to do to, you know, help give credit where credit is due if you've been helped with a macro. So let's walk through this. Okay, so here's the line, first line, to set up the find dialog box. This is what will happen when you record a find operation. So this line defines what's in the find box. When it says find what, within the quotation marks here, that's where you put what you want to find. So contents of the find box. All this stuff is the settings in all your checkboxes below. So these are all the options that you would choose. And what's in this shell one doesn't matter. These will all change depending on what you record or what you are planning to do. This one where I lifted it from, it happened to be using wildcards, but if you want to change it to not use wildcards, you would just go in and type that and change the true to false, if that's what you're doing. Okay, and so end with ends that definition. This line performs the first operation, so it finds the first instance of whatever you're going to find. Okay, and here is where the loop starts. Okay, do while selection find found. That means, okay, as long as you keep finding what I've defined above, do the stuff below here. So that you got to your macro right here. Again, not as a comment, as actual active code, but that's where your macro would go. It'll execute the find operation, okay, that was loaded up above, and then it will loop back up and do it all again. So it will find, right here, find your first thing that you want to find, do whatever the macro is that you want it to do, execute it, and it will loop back up to this do while selection find found. And it'll just keep going until it doesn't find anything. You won't get a dialog box or anything like that. It'll just and go right through, okay? So that's how that works. Are there any questions on this so far?
So far, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box or Q&A.
Okay, well then we will carry right along. Okay, so an example of this is setting up an outline for a manuscript. I'm going to pull up a file here. Okay, so this is more or less the original format. This is a cookbook manuscript, and this is how I received it. And it just had random, you can see somehow it's got headline, outline levels applied to stuff in the reference list and just random lines and stuff. It hasn't been outlined or styled really or anything like that. Then there's lots, in this manuscript, there's lots of sidebars and recipes. And the other thing about this manuscript is this client happens to use inline codes. You can see we don't use styles for this one. There's still quite a few. This is a Big 5 publisher, and they still use inline codes sometimes for their projects. And there's a bunch of recipes at the end. And so I want to be able to see a list of, an outline level of H1s, H2s, boxes. I want to see all these recipe titles. so that if I have a reference to one somewhere in the text, I want to confirm that that's the correct title and so on. So I want to be able to see that. Now, if this were styles, I could just set the outline level within the style definition. But since we're using inline codes, I need to use the codes to do that. So first thing we need to do is record the base macro to do this. So I'm just going to go right up to the top, and I'm going to find, okay, so here's an H1. So I want to set H1s as level 1. So I'm going to record this macro, and it will end up in my normal new macros module. We will go in there and look at that. So I'm going to record this. We started recording. Okay, so here's my recording. And I want to open the paragraph dialog box. Oh, what is going on here? Okay. Do it the old-fashioned way. Okay, so I want to assign this to level 1. Okay. All right, so there it is. And I'll just paragraph down and stop the macro. So if we go to our new macros, okay. Okay, so this is the contents of the paragraph dialog box, and all this other stuff we don't even need to know about, but we need to find the outline level. We can delete all this other stuff. Okay. So that's what we want to change. We just want to change the outline level to level 1, and then we're going to move down one line, one paragraph, okay? Actually, we should make this paragraph. Okay, so this is the guts of the code that we're going to insert in our loop macro. Now I could sit and re-record all of this stuff. Oh, I forgot to do the search. We'll find it. We could sit and re-record this macro over and over, or we could just edit the shell. So I'm going to pull up the actual macro that I used for this. Let's see. I'm going to go to tricks. Okay, here's the part I left out. I left out searching for the actual code. And we actually started with a part number. For this actual client, I always do outlines that include the part number, part title, chapter number, chapter title, and then all the head levels, the recipes, the boxes, and so on. So this is how the macro is set up. So here comes the first loop. And remember from our shell, we had the find dialog. Okay, the text we want to find is a code for part number. We want to search forward, everything else is false. End with, okay, we're going to find the first instance of PN, which is part number code. So that will be selected, okay. While, for every PN that we find, we're going to do this. We're going to make sure and move the cursor to the home, to the beginning of the line, okay. We will set the paragraph outline level to 1, and this is all going to come out of the macro that you record. You're just going to plop it in here. Without the comments won't be in here. I just put the comments in to show what we're doing. Okay. And then we will move down a line, a paragraph, and then do it again. And this section is going to search for every instance of PN within angle brackets, and it's going to change it to outline level 1. Okay. Now when it doesn't find any more, it's going to go down to the next line. Okay. This line tells us to go back to the beginning of the file, the top of the manuscript. Okay. And we start the next loop. Now we search for part title. Same deal, same thing. Do while is found. We're going to change it to level 1, move down a line, and loop back up to here. We're going to find the PT and loop, loop, loop. We're going to find all the part titles and change them to outline level 1. Okay. back up to the top of the file. Our next loop is chapter number. Same thing over and over. And you can just take that original macro that you recorded and just plop it in repeatedly with this line in between to get you back up to the top of the file. And it's just going to go up to the top of the file each time and search for whichever code you're looking for and do what you want to do to it, which in this case is change this outline level, okay? And there's a whole bunch of these in here. There are, let's see, we've got chapter title, head level 1, head level 2, head level 3, head level 4, sidebar box title, unnumbered list heads were significant for whatever reason, box title. We've got all these different codes. Okay, here's the fun part. Okay, recipe subhead. These are, I think this was for stuff like breakfast recipes, lunch recipes, that sort of thing. So those will all be set to, what did I set them to? Outline level 2. Recipe titles are all going to be outline level 3. Okay, and that's as far as I went. So, and then the last thing that the loop does is it goes back up to the beginning of the file. So it'll run all these searches and make all these changes and then put you back up at the top of the file where you started. Okay, are there any questions on that so far before I demo the actual macro?
So far, no questions.
Okay. All right. So let's run this thing. Okay. So we're going to find the okay. So here's the coded file. You can see all the junk has been stripped out of the navigation pane. And if we go down, okay, you can see these have all been coded. All the codes have been inserted. Let's go to the recipe section. Okay, so now see each recipe has got the RT in front of it. So we know that that's what the macro is going to find. It's going to find all these recipe titles. Okay, so back up to the top of the file. And we're going to run the macro. And bingo, there's our outline. Took 10 seconds. I wouldn't want to do all that by hand. And if we go down to the recipe section, we've got a nice outline of all the different sections with each recipe title, subhead, recipe titles, and so on. So when I'm editing, I can just scroll through the navigation pane to double check, well, what was the title of that recipe? Is that accurate? Okay, great. So they're all there. So that is the loop macro shell and how it works. Any questions or comments?
It looks like we do have a question coming in.
Okay.
Do you remove the outline when you are done?
No, I leave it in because it's something that the client can use it, it's a way to navigate the file. Because if you remember, on the original file, we didn't have a way to navigate the document. And if you've got an outline set up in your navigation pane, that's really useful while you're working because you can see what section you're in. You can refer back and forth without having to actually scroll through the document or search for things. It's all right there.
I think that's our only question.
Okay. Excellent. Well, moving right along. Our shell number 2 is automating turning off tracking. And I don't even have to ask you all to raise your hands. If I could see you, you'd all have them in the air. Who has turned off tracking to do some little thing and then forgot to turn it back on, and an hour later or 4 hours later you go, oh nuts, you've lost all your work because you didn't track it. So this shell is great for common things you want to do on track. They're just little things. but you want to just turn tracking off, do something little, and then go back to the state that you were in when you started. And it works the other way too. You can set it up the other way. Like say there's something that you always want to track, you can set it up to do that as well. So I'm going to credit this macro to Hillary Powers showed me this one, and it has some nice work on it by Rich Aden, who was the former owner of the American Editor blog. I use it for things like highlighting or my flagging macro, or I just showed you setting outline levels if I want to set an outline level individually while I'm editing. That isn't something that the author needs to see tracked. So that's something that I would want to just turn off the tracking and turn it back on. But instead of doing it manually, I've got it built into the macro. And so let me just pull up the actual code for the shell. And we'll walk through it. Okay, so what this does is it remembers the current state of the tracking, whether it's on or off. So it really doesn't matter whether you're tracking or not. It will put it back the way you had it. So it puts that little bit of information aside, and then it turns the tracking on or off, whichever you have specified in this particular macro. It runs the code that you want to run, and then it puts the tracking back the way it was. Okay, and the way it does that is through a programming trick called a Boolean variable, which can be set to either true or false. So you define tracking to be either on or off, and then you put that little bit aside. Okay, so this stuff, I mean, this is part of the shell. You don't have to mess with this at all, but I'm just letting you know this is what this part of it does. So this defines this phrase as a Boolean variable, so it can be set to either true or false, and this line sets that value to whatever the current state of tracking is. So if in the active document, if track revisions is currently on, then this variable remembers, okay, tracking is going to be on. Okay, tracking was on when we started. If it is currently off, then it remembers that it was off. And that just stays stored in that variable off to the side while we do all our other stuff. Okay. This line then goes ahead and manually sets tracking to false no matter what. So tracking is now off. Okay. The code still remembers whatever it used to be. It used to be on or it used to be off, but now it's definitely off. Okay. And once again, this is where you put whatever the code is that you want to run without the beginning apostrophe. Again, this is just a comment. You take out the comment. You need to put live code in here. And then the next line sets the tracking state to whatever you stored in this value. So if you set it to true up here, meaning that tracking was on when you started, you turned it off. Now it's going to be back on again. Or if it was off and it was off, you turned it off, it's still going to be off. Again, depending on whatever was happening when you started running the macro. Okay. And then the final thing I do in this macro that I try to do in a lot of macros is just add this line. All it does is save your document. Again, that's a handy little thing to have if you've been working along, all of a sudden something crashes and you just lost your last half hour because you haven't been saving. I put this in as many macros as I can. There are a few macros where if I put this line in, it slows them down, like you get the little spinning circle. Then don't bother. But if you have it in enough of your macros here and there, you'll minimize the amount of stuff you'll lose if you happen to have a crash. So that's the basics of the auto tracking shell. Okay. Are there any questions?
I think we are good right now.
Okay. So far, so good. Okay. So let's demo how this works. Back to the files. Come on, where are you? Okay, it's still thinking. There you are. Okay, this is just a little chunk of a bibliography I was working on. The template that is attached is my style template for this client. And you can see when I'm working, this is the template that I use when I'm working on files, and I happen to like Verdana 14 point. I define my character styles, like obviously italic is in orange with a really thin red border. You can see bold, there's some bold down here that's pink with a little thin border. And that's only something that I can see. It doesn't go back to the client this way, but it helps me visually see what's italic and what isn't, and what's bold and what isn't. So it's easy to catch things like, you can see there's all kinds of little stray, here's some stray italic, and here's a place where it should be italic but isn't. So in this, for this file, you can see there's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be confirmed by the author. The author doesn't care if a comma is italic or not. This is just cleanup sort of stuff. And we don't want to litter the file with a bunch of tracking stuff and balloons and all that kind of thing. So what I have is a macro that does this while it's untracked. Okay, so let's take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so here's my macro for changing the text to italic without tracking. Okay, so here, it remembers what my original tracking state was, which if I'm editing, most of the time it's going to be on. So it remembers the tracking was on, turns tracking off, and then takes the selection of what I selected and makes it italic. Again, not tracked. Okay, so in this case, the macro guts is just one line. Okay, and then it changes the tracking again back to the way it was before, which it was true because I was editing, so tracking was on. Okay, then I have two other corresponding macros. One sets it back to the default paragraph font, or Roman. It does the same thing, just only it sets the style to default paragraph font. And then the third one sets it to bold. Now, if for your purposes you need to have small caps or superscript or subscript, and you want to do that, and you don't want it to be tracked, you can certainly copy these macros and edit them to do that, or any other type of character style that you are applying. So let's see why that comes in handy. Okay, so I'm editing along here, and I want to show you too. So when I'm actually changing something to italic, okay, so there you can see it's in dark red, so that tells me that that is a tracked change. Here, I'll do one that you can see here too.
Hey,
all right.
So there. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So Christine's asking, you didn't put the active document save in those because you do them so often that it would bog down Word, right?
Yes. Is that it?
Yep, that was it.
Okay. Okay, so I'm editing along here, and oh, well, this is just kind of, I don't need the author to see this. So I've got these assigned to keyboard shortcuts. The italic untracked is set to F7, bold untracked is set to Shift F7, and DPF untracked is set to F8. So it's just one or two keystrokes to change this. So right now I'm just going to hit F8, and it's untracked, and I just changed it back to Roman text. Now the beauty of this is you don't have to target, because it's untracked, you don't have to target exactly the part you're going for. So I can sit and I can select all this and just hit italic, okay? So let's say I want this to be italic, I can just, you can be kind of a little bit sloppy because it doesn't matter what part of it you're hitting, as long as you'll capture the part that you mean to change, like right here, okay? I don't have to target those particular 1, 2, 6 characters. I can just grab some of it and it'll be clean. Or like here, I can just go home, hit the macro, and it's done, and it's invisible to the author, okay? Or right here, I can just go, I'm just holding the arrow key down and change it. And if you goof up, who cares? I can do this all day, okay? One thing that I make sure to do is if I'm at the end of a line, because this is actually italic. If you look up on the on the toolbar here, it is actually italic. So I want to take that one out too. So I'll just select this and clean it up that way. And the DPF also works for bold. Okay. So you aren't littering your manuscript with a bunch of, you know, inconsequential changes that the author doesn't need to see or approve. You're just cleaning up. Okay, like here, for example, where the heck's my pointer? There it is. Okay, so I want to catch both of those. I don't have to mouse each one. I just arrow down, and it's clean. Okay. Same here. I can just go Shift End and italic, and we're good to go. Or here, I can just go, okay, to the end. So that's how that works. Any questions?
Nope, no questions right now.
Okay. Okay, and our third shell today is creating a custom dialog box that offers you choices. This is one of my favorites. So who misses menus? And who can't remember a jillion keyboard shortcuts? I'll confess, I hate the ribbon. When we had menus in Word, I had all kinds of custom menus set up for my own, you know, coding and all kinds of macros and stuff. And I could set my own keyboard shortcuts, and you know, with the ribbon, they kind of took a lot of that functionality away. So instead, you can set up a dialog box that shows you the options that you have based on whatever you've put in the dialog macro. So you use one keyboard shortcut to call up the dialog box, and then you can put all kinds of stuff in there without having to remember all those shortcuts, because in the code you have put them in there so that they're right in front of your face. And it's also handy for things that maybe require a lot of mousing otherwise. You can just find the keyboard shortcuts to do that, put them in a macro, put them in the dialog box, and then it's maybe only a couple of keystrokes instead of mouse, 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 you know, clicking around, or a bunch of keyboard shortcuts all together. So let's take a look at how that goes. Okay, let's see. We are in tricks. And we need to get to this module, and we will go to, okay, so let's demo this dialog box shell. Again, this is based on code that I got from Hillary Powers with additions by Howard Silcock from the Word PC list. So this stuff is just, and I've got this assigned to a keyboard shortcut of Control-Shift-D. This is just a demo dialog box. So this is just defining variables. This is the text that goes in the title. This is the guts of what you want the dialog box to ask you. Okay, so what's in the quote marks is what you're going to see. And this is just a line break. Okay, so this starts a new line. So you will see press R for red on one line, press B for blue on the next line, and then press G for green on the third line, and you don't need a line return because that's the last one. Okay. And now this line pops up an input box, which we will see, and it asks you what's your favorite color. Okay. This line sets up the choices of what you're going to be able to type in and what each choice does. Okay. So case is where you put what you want to type. Okay. So for the first option, we're going to press R. Okay. And it's not case sensitive. So I always just do them all lowercase, and you can do numbers or characters or whatever you want. So in this case, I've chosen R for red. And now for the first option, you can also put in just blank quotes. And that just means that you can just hit enter for the first choice, so that saves you a keystroke. So you want to put your most common thing that you use there. Other than that, you have to hit enter if you actually enter something. So if you type something in that box, you have to hit enter to activate it. Okay. So for our first option, it's going to type I like red. And then it's going to move back a character. it's going to select the preceding 3 characters. It's going to turn them red. And then it will go forward 2 characters past the end of that quote mark and type a line return, okay? And same thing for the next 2. It will do the same thing only for blue and green. All right. So here's our, let's do it, okay? So Control-Shift-D to activate the dialog box. And you can see it's asking me, what's my favorite color? Press R for red, B for blue, G for green. Now I can just hit enter, and it gives me I like red. I bring it up again and hit R, and press enter. Oh, look at that, I still like red. Or maybe I like blue. I like blue, so there's blue. And there's green. So there are basically 4 different things you can do. The first 2 give you the same result. Because that's that first option, you actually have that option in the code to hit either nothing or the character that you've chosen. And again, this is just, you can do any kind of complex stuff in there, just whatever macro you put in underneath that case line. Whatever you want to do, here's what you put in, okay? Any questions on that?
No questions so far.
Okay. All right, so let's look at...
I spoke too soon. I'm sorry, we do have a question.
Okay.
Could you use the shell like text expander?
Like text expander. I guess, if that's... Well, text expander is where you type something... yeah, if you want to use it for something like that, like if you want to assign, like say you've got a favorite macro that you use, you could, yeah, if you wanted to just type a line, yeah, that's one way that you could use it. Yeah. You would just put in, choose a shortcut for whatever it is that you want to be typed out, and then put that text in. You would just use the selection type text, and then whatever the content of your query or your text or whatever you want could be in there. I wouldn't use it for that just because we already have all these wonderful tools. I use Phrase Expander. I've got a million things in there. And hopefully if we have time, I would like to show another macro that's a super duper time saver. So we'll come back to that. But yes, you definitely can, but there are other ways. Okay? So let's look at the code for an actual dialog box. Oh, we need to go to this. Okay. Oh, it's not going to let me do it. Okay. So here, this piece of manuscript this client does use styles. So you can see we've got body text, bibliohead, and different things, and I've just styled it differently just to show things. So for this particular client, I have a dialog box for applying styles, okay? Let me show you the code for that quick. Where is it? It's in here. Come on. Oh, is it? Yeah, because I got this in here. Okay. Okay. Why are you not showing me? There we go. Okay. So this is the code for the dialog box that I just pulled up. And it's showing me all my choices. I type I for italic, B for bold, M for small caps, U for subscript, and so on. This line just gives me a blank line, just so I can organize, because these are all the ones I use the most often, and these are all character styles, whereas these are paragraph styles. So that's why I've got them separated. Okay, and here's the pop-up box, apply style. And here are my choices again. For italic, I can either type I or nothing and just hit enter. And it applies the client's style for italic, which is ital, and so on and so on and so on. Okay. So back to the bibliography. I pull up my dialog box, and let's say I want to make this line, the bibliography line, body text, or it is body text. So let's make it CO body text. So I type C for CO body text, and you can see it changed the style. Okay. And now I'm going to go down. I'll hit it again, and this time I want it to be space break, flush left. So I type an S. Now it's space break, flush left. The next line, I want it to be body text. Okay. Let's say that actually I want all of these to be body text. I can select them all, making sure to select the entire paragraph, and then hit this and T. Now they're all body text. Okay. And the client gave me a wonderful template, and they're like, oh, well, you just go up into, up into the ribbon, and you click here and click there. And I'm not a mouser. I'm a keyboard girl. I don't like wasting time mousing around. So I put this stuff in a dialog box and give myself keyboard shortcuts, and it just makes things so much easier. So that's how that works. Are there any questions on the dialog box?
No questions.
Okay. Another thing that I use dialog box for, my two most common ones are for styling manuscripts and also for navigating my style sheet. I put bookmarks in for all the various headings that I have, and then I have a dialog box that takes me to those keyboard shortcuts. So I use Alt plus slash because that's a one-hand shortcut to pull up the dialog box, and then I hit Alt slash N to go to the names section, or Alt slash slash again to go to the alphabetical section. That's the one I use the most. So I've got, I don't know, maybe a dozen bookmarks in my style sheet, and I can just use 3 keystrokes to navigate to anywhere in my style sheets. And for some of my books, it gets really long, and I don't want to be scrolling up and down, back and forth. So those keyboard shortcuts take me exactly to where I want to go to, drop something in or look something up or whatever. Okay, yay, we have enough time left. I want to show you a really cool, this is kind of a bonus. We talked about doing the 3 shells, but this is kind of a bonus macro that I've been using, and it's you're going to love it. I hope you love it. It's called Converter, because I called it Converter. It used to be called something else. Based on a macro written by Hilary Powers, and she originally designed it as a way to convert digits to words. Now, how often do we need to spell out a number, and who wants to sit and type 67, 78, whatever the number is. So this, basically what this does is there's a whole long list of things, and for each case, it will change whatever is after the word case to whatever you've specified in the next line. It's a 1-line macro for each case, okay? You have to select whatever it is in your manuscript. Here's what we've got. Defining variables, and then it brings up a message box. You've selected something in your manuscript, and it will tell you, this is what happens if you don't select anything, okay? It will tell you got to select something. So select whatever you're going to do, and then what this macro does is it looks through this entire list to see if something matches what you've selected. So if you've selected the number 1 and you activate the macro, it's on a keyboard shortcut, it will replace it with whatever the text is. I have this one on Control plus the plus sign on the number pad. So I use this one constantly. I've got my left hand on the Control key and right hand on the plus sign, and I'm always, you can replace any one of these things with the same keyboard shortcut. So let me just demo it to kind of give you an idea how it works, and then we'll go through and see what I've got in here. Okay. Okay, so here I am. I'm editing along, and we're going to spell out round thousand numbers. So I'm just going to select this 20,000 and then hit my keyboard shortcut, and it just types out 20,000. Okay. 77, and this is all just hitting Control plus. Here's another number, 30,000. 100,000. I didn't have to sit and type all that stuff. I hit 2 keys to type that all out. And I don't know about you, but I'm a really sloppy typist. So it really saves me a lot of trouble. Oh, I mistyped. I got to go back and fix it, blah, blah, blah. But I've also got other things in here. It changes which to that. Same keyboard shortcut. If you need to spell out US, I also have in there US without the final period in case this falls at the end of a sentence. Okay. I've got % in there. There's some more stuff. Did I put any more in here? Perhaps not. But that gives you an idea of all those things I changed with just the one keyboard shortcut. And sometimes I can go for a couple of paragraphs only just using that shortcut because of all the stuff that I've got inside the macro. So let's look at what's in here. This is actually my live converter macro. One other thing that you need to know also is that as long as it's just a digit that you're searching for, you don't have to put quote marks around. But if there are letters or other things in there, then you have to put quote marks around the case selection, and we'll see that as we go. So I've got every number from 1 to 100 is in here. I've got all the ordinals. And see, because we've got letters in here, I have to put quote marks around it. We don't have quote marks around the case here, but we have to have it here. Okay, and you can plop these all in. You can use, macros and cut and paste and all that kind of thing to add things in when you've got these in. But once you've got them all in, that's the last time you have to do it. So we've got all the ordinals from 1 to 99. We've got 20s. This comes up a lot in fiction. I do a lot of expanding to written out numbers. We've got all the hundreds. We have thousands, both with and without the comma. Notice that we have to have the quote marks around because we do have the comma in there. We have all the 10,000s, okay, all the way up to 100,000. I have never typed any of these phrases out as long as it's in the manuscript. I don't type them out. I just hit the shortcut. All the 100,000s. And then this is where it really gets fun, okay? So I showed you the US. I've got every variation here that I have ever possibly seen. I had a manuscript that had that stupid space in between, so I put that in. I've got all of the state abbreviations. So who can remember what the abbreviation is for Alaska? Quick! I don't remember them. So if I see Alaska and I want to abbreviate it, I just select it and hit the macro shortcut, and it puts it in for me. And I also have it for the old abbreviations. Now the problem is I can't do it both ways. If I have Alabama, I can't. It's only a one-to-many correspondence. I can't, or many-to-one. I can't change Alabama to both AL and ALA. So, but most often we're getting rid of these old ones and not putting them in. So that is one downfall. So I've got all of the state abbreviations in here, both ways. If you're Canadian, go ahead and put the provinces in there. I haven't had a chance or really a need to do it yet. Same thing with month abbreviations, the time shortcuts. Again, this one I put in because of my fiction editing. I'm forever spelling out common times. I hate typing numbers, man. So we've got all of those. And then you can get into common grammatical changes, okay, or usage changes. We can get into sensitivity editing. We can change women to female, or persons to people, or Indian to Native American. I can never remember the name of this line. I know that this word is offensive. This one isn't, but I can never remember. Well, now I don't have to. This one, I can't type the word lieutenant to save my life on the first try. So I just put it in here, and when I see LT period, I just hit this, and it changes it. And in my text expander, I have it so that I can type it from scratch. If I need to type the word lieutenant, I have a shortcut for that. This works for if you find it in your manuscript. Oh, and also notice that it is case sensitive, so I need to have one of each for capped and not capped, depending on if it's at the beginning of the sentence. World War II, yeah, I had a manuscript recently where the author did this all over the place, and it was driving me nuts. So in went this. There's our percent, ampersand, and degrees, chapters, and I've got a waiting list of, I've been so busy, I just kind of make a little cheat sheet, and I'm going to put more things in here when I get there. Now, I'm going to actually provide a document that has the text of the shells and a shell version of the converter also. I'm going to be mean and make you add all your own stuff because it's good practice, it's good exercise, and it might stir you to think of one of those things you might be able to put in that maybe I haven't thought of that are useful to you. But I promise once you start using this converter, you'll wonder how you live without it. So any questions on converter?
Yep, we've got a couple questions. So first one,
okay.
Will it still work if you highlight more than just the text you want to convert, or do you have to be precise in your selection? For example, instead of highlighting 20,000 to convert it, could you highlight 20,000 Philadelphians?
No, you have to select exactly what you're changing. And you know what? I keep thinking, I would love it if it would just search forward and find the next thing that's in the list, but I haven't figured out how to program that yet, because that would be awesome. If I just had the cursor say a few words before it, and oh, I see something up ahead that I want to change. There's probably code for it, but I'm not that smart. So you do have to actually select the exact thing, and sometimes it won't do anything, and it'll bring up that box. Let me show you. So I'll show you what it'll do. Where is it? Okay. Yeah, so if you select 20,000 Philadelphians, oh no, it won't. It will just do nothing. Okay, and if I don't select anything, you get that little nag box. Yeah, you have to select, and even if you just select the space, you get nothing. It has to be the exact choice. Anything else?
Yep, got a couple more. In the same way you convert numbers, could you use this converter to change contractions to spelled out versions?
Sure. Absolutely. Like can't to cannot. Absolutely. Put them in the list. That's a really great idea. I'm going to put it on my list.
Next one, for the 20s, 30s, 40s, you also have to have it for 20s, 30s, 40s in case they actually wrote it that way. And the second time they have the apostrophe in it.
Yeah, you could add that in. Again, I haven't run across that. But yeah, that'd be a good one to add. Absolutely. You guys are thinking great. This is awesome.
Okay, a couple more. If you wanted, you could link this. Sorry, I'm trying to read through everyone's chats here. Give me 1 second to get. Okay, can someone direct me to a good online resource to understand the intersection of macros, wildcard replacements, and the need to turn off track changes before running any macro?
I would refer you to Jack Lyon, the editorium. Off the top of my head, I can't think if he's got anything directly online. But if you were to go to the macro cookbook and the wildcard cookbook, they're $10 each, and they're worth way more than that. There's a lot of good tutorials in there and explanations of how to do some of this advanced stuff. I would point you to Jack for that sort of stuff. Editorium.com.
Okay, I think that's all of our questions.
Okay, then I'll just go back to the slides here quick. And so again, here's our resources, and they are on your handbook. These are the books that I mentioned. They're available on Amazon, and there's probably a link on his website. Hillary Powers has got a great little book. It's recently updated, no, not too recently. She's semi-retired now, but she's got a great little book on helping Word 2010, and a lot of this transfers forward to 2016, 2019. little tweaks for editors particularly that'll help you work more efficiently. And I hope you all know about Paul Beverly. He's a wonderful editor in the UK who has got, I don't know, something 600, 700, something like that, macros that he provides for free. And he's very active online. He's very helpful if you need something, need him to work on something, or you want to understand how his stuff works. He's got lots of great documentation, and he's pretty available if you, he's got videos showing how to use his stuff. It's just great. So check out those 3 resources. And finally, if you have any questions, I know we had to rush through a lot of stuff. We didn't have a lot of time for Q&A, but you're more than welcome to email me if you have any questions about any of this stuff. I'll answer it as best I can within reason. But so I hope you found some of this stuff useful, and go forth and be productive and efficient and prosperous.
Thank you so much, Amy. This was great. And thank you everyone for joining us today.
All right. Thank you, Abby, for hosting.